So today we'll be looking at one of the more controversial parts of the Bible, which is Romans chapter 9, verses 18 and 19, which reads, "So then, to whom he desires, he has mercy, and to whom he desires, he hardens. You will then say to me, why does he find fault? For who has resisted his will?" So the first part of that, we're going to work in reverse here. So the first part, we're going to get to the back end, and then the second part, we're going to get to the front end, right? So the second part of the verse, which is 19, tells us what? Now, who can resist his will? More importantly, it tells us this. It tells us that, how does he find fault? Right? So now the million-dollar question is, how does God still find fault? Even though he created you knowing that you were going to do what it is that you did, whether good or bad, right? But it tells us this in Genesis 3:6. "So when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate." So this is obviously about Adam and Eve. This is the fall. This is the first point in which God finds man guilty, because he instructed in the previous chapter, chapter 2, Genesis 2, that what? That man, Adam and Eve, ought not to do what? To touch of that tree of knowledge of good and evil. For if they do, surely they will die. So he instructed them not to do that. And then in the next chapter, right, as I just read in 3:6, Eve decides to do what? To take the fruit because she thought that it was good for consumption and that it was going to make her wise. And so she decided to take the fruit and give some to her husband Adam, and then he also ate of the fruit too. So that is the first instance in which God finds man guilty for something. So to go back to that verse 9:19, how does he find fault? Well, there's evidence number one. Evidence number two we found in James 2:10, which reads, "For whoever keeps the whole law yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking it all." And so that's evidence number two as to how God finds man guilty. If you break one law, you've broken all. You're a lawbreaker. You're guilty of breaking all. So those two verses show us how God finds faults within humanity, right? Now the second part tells us this: who can resist his will, right? So now, in order for us to understand what his will is, we have to look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18, which reads, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you." So that's the will of God. The will of God through Christ is what? Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and to give thanks in all circumstances. That is the will of God. So that is his will. So now you're saying, who can resist his will? Well, the only people that can resist his will are those who don't abide in it. See, in other words, not abiding in his will is literally you resisting his will. That's it. But just because you have choice doesn't mean God doesn't have choice too, right? Because some people will sit there and say, well, that's not fair that God takes the measures that he takes. He has choice too. People think humans are the only ones that can make choices, and God can't make a choice. God has to make a choice. Every being must make choices. Life's about choices that either you make or that another being makes that impacts you. So God also has to make executive decisions. He can't just stand pat. Even Satan makes executive decisions to torture you, to harm you, to torment you. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't even do it. It's as simple as that. So God has a will. Satan has a will. You have a will. It's as simple as that. But his will is greater than yours, and he's greater than Satan's. Because why? He is the most powerful entity that exists. So obviously his will is going to be superior to all of ours, right? If we look at the previous verse, Romans 9:18, it tells us what? "So then he desires to show mercy on whom he desires, and whom he hardens, he desires to harden," right? So God chooses to show mercy upon those who he shows mercy upon. Now you have to ask yourself, well, why would he show mercy upon these people? Because there's what? He's giving them opportunity. There's a glimmer of hope. There's a chance for this individual to change. And then for those who he hardened, it's because they set themselves on this path of unrighteousness. They have not decided to stray away from iniquity. And God, being all knowing, he knows what you're going to amount to in life anyways. He hardens your heart, meaning he solidifies you in that path. That's what that means, right? Hardening of the heart is solidifying you in that path. So if he's going to solidify you in that path of unrighteousness, it is literally because you made that choice yourself on your own accord, that you set your hearts on evil, and that you decided that you're going to dedicate your life's worth to said evil. And so God decides to harden your heart as a way of solidifying you in that unrighteousness. And so that is what God is trying to convey here in Romans 9:18 and 9:19.